to all of you a very warm welcome today. In our today's webinar theme, we are focusing on changing lifestyles is the new normal. I'm sure you've heard of, this theme before, but the intent really is to kind of give it a perspective, an international perspective focused on the US. So in this new normal, we are seeing that a second home has become an extension of our primary lifestyle for encompassing our personal and professional lives. We aim to inform you of your choices in the US as a home base, given its superior medical, security, cultural infrastructure, and probably from today onwards, strong political thing as well that will be there. We'll be discussing diversification of portfolio, offshore investments, remittance of funds overseas, uh, of course, US real estate investment choices, focusing on the East Coast in Miami, and not to forget immigration opportunities in the US through the EB5 route or the Grenada route, which is emerging to be a strong contender. We are proud to host this exclusive webinar for the clients of India Sotheby's, Deloitte, and our wealth partner, ASK Wealth. Before I introduce my panelists, I'm going to start with a brief introduction of India Sotheby's International Realty. Set up in 2014 in India, we are a team of close to 70 professionals from private banking, luxury, hospitality, and of course, real estate business, bringing together decades of transaction advisory experience. Our global presence spans across 72 countries with 1,000 offices and 23,000 advisors on the ground. In the year 2019, Sotheby's Realty delivered a global property sales volume of $114 billion. dollars. Our brand heritage, global network, and a prop tech marketing platform makes us the largest, most unique luxury residential real estate advisor worldwide. Since we're talking about the US today, I would like to share with you that Sotheby's Realty as a network has over 650 offices in the US alone with close to 18,000 advisors. Quick check on how we're going to roll out this webinar. We're hoping to keep it within the 60-minute timeline. The session will cover three key tracks amongst the three panelists, which we aim to cover in the first 30 minutes, and followed by question and answers from the audience, from our listeners today in the last 15 minutes. I would request the viewers to keep posting their questions as we go about this session and not wait for just to post them in the last 15 minutes. I'm now going to introduce our panelists for today's session. Please bear with me for a name and designation introduction so as to save on time for the panel discussion. I'll start with my co-host for today, Akash Puri, Director International for India Sotheby's International Realty.
Thank,
Moving on to Akash, you're there. You want to just say hi?
thank you, Ashwin. And hello, everyone. We're very excited to do our US-based webinar.
Thanks, Akash, for coming on board with me. Moving on to the other panelists, we've got Somnath Mukherjee, Managing Partner and Chief Investment Officer, ASK Wealth Advisors Private Limited.
Hi everyone.
Great. We have Viraj Malhan, Tax Principal, Deloitte, USI. Viraj,
No, I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
pleasure is all ours. And we have Vijay Dhingra, Partner, Deloitte, Haskins and Sells, LLP.
Hi, Ashwin.
Hi,
Happy to
Vijay.
be here.
And last but certainly not the least, we have our friend all the way from Miami, and it's been a pretty early morning for him, Fernando Nuñez, Executive Vice President, One Sotheby's International Realty. Welcome, Fernando.
Good morning, everyone. For me, good morning, good afternoon for you guys.
Right. I hope it's a good morning for you.
Yes, with a coffee, everything is better in life. So yes, it's perfect.
Lovely. So let's embark upon the journey of global mobility. So, Somnath, I'm going to put this first question to you, since you are really the voice of the high net worth, ultra high net worth promoter segment. You and your team are dealing with them day in and day out. So, my question goes to you is, amidst this COVID, are you witnessing an emerging trend of global mobility, estate planning, uh, global taxation, etc., from your high net worth clients? And if yes, what are some of the reasons that you see them giving you for such behavior of global mobility?
Right. Thanks, Ashwin. And it's a very pertinent question as well. There is indeed an increased demand from the Indian high net worth on the overall concept of global mobility. Of
Hmm.
course, the reason for the same is very bespoke in nature, and there are a few trends that are interesting. Maybe a few years back, most of the reason pertain to lifestyle choices or tax residency and so on.
Hmm.
Increasingly, it is also around expansion of businesses, um, tapping into technology ecosystems for some, because there are some places around the world that offer a wider, better ecosystem for some of the new age technology ventures that are getting scaled up in India. As you know, several of the storied Indian unicorns are actually based out of, or headquartered out of, or domiciled out of offshore jurisdictions for
Hmm.
several reasons. Ease of doing business, sometimes tax, sometimes just the ease of being able to attract global capital in those businesses and so on. So that becomes a very important driver of why people are looking for mobility solutions. What has also happened is that a very large number of Indian high net worths have decided to monetize their operating businesses. And with the monetization of operating business has also come a decision in terms of what next in life. And
Right.
in turn goes back to, what's the next step, not just for yourself, but also the family, and lifestyle aspects of it have gotten dovetailed into it. Last but not the least has been the question of children's education. A lot of people have touched upon that as a very important factor driving their requirement for mobility, because as education gets tougher, and especially elite education gets tougher to access, especially in India, people
Hmm.
are looking for better solutions that are available elsewhere, which can allow their kids have access to high quality education, with a level of rigor that's probably not as much as it is required in India. So the motivations have shifted from pure, having a residence in London or having a residence in Dubai kind of motivation to, I would say, a lot more nuanced in terms of stage of life motivation, whether it is expansion of business or looking at the next gen.
That was really well put, Shomnath. And I think that is really the key driver that all of us are witnessing. You being at the forefront of it, talking to your clients day in and day out, and getting that input in terms of what's driving their decision on global mobility. I'm going to just go to Akash and ask him his view, that in the light of the global mobility witnessed, and the numerous factors put down by Shomnath, coupled with what we are seeing in terms of certain visa restrictions which we keep hearing about, what are the other ways of achieving this global mobility?
Sure. So, Ashwin, of late, there has been a huge uptake in the program for a passport or a citizenship by investment program through the Grenada route. And this has been because of the fact that, H1B1 visas are getting more difficult. EB5, for example, has now increased their limit from 900,000 to from 500,000 to 900,000 minimum, going up to 1.8 million. And there
Right.
seems to be a waiting period of, 7 to 8 years and beyond. And there is an opportunity to get into the US within 9 months from filing the application for a Grenada passport.
Wow.
So I'll just take a minute to explain this. So Grenada is a small island country, and it is just 3.5 hours flight south of Miami, right? So just to get the understanding of the proximity, it's in the Caribbean.
I guess
And
that's why you got Fernando on the
yes,
webinar today, huh?
absolutely. There's some lovely pics of his and Ignacio and Grenada. So I've been following them up on Instagram. So the interesting about Grenada is that you don't need to visit Grenada to get a passport. You can apply for your passport sitting in India, and this is a big benefit when it comes in terms of the pandemic that we're coming across right now. Because in the rest of the jurisdictions, you have to visit, do your biometrics, and a lot of stuff that needs to be done. So, for example, a Portugal CBI you'll have to visit. For a Spain CBI or a Greece CBI, you have to visit the country to select the property, and then do your biometrics. Here, sitting in India, you could get your passport. So as I said, it takes about between 3 to 6 months to get an approval for your passport. The moment you get a passport, within 3 months of that, you can apply for an E2 visa that gives you access to the US, and you can live in the US, right? And so to put in a nutshell, 9 months and an additional investment besides the Grenada passport. Grenada passport investment is about 300,000 for an individual, plus another 150 that goes to the E2 in the US. So at $450,000, you're in the US in 9 months. Right?
So Akash, I hear you say that the Grenada route beats the EB5 hollow, beat in terms of timelines, wherein EB5 is taking 7-8 years and this is taking maybe 9 months. In terms of monies, wherein that's 900,000 or more, and this is probably 1/3. Right. And but I have a question, which is with regard to the weight of this passport. What would be that like if I was to compare the Grenadian passport rank globally?
So Noya, interestingly, it gives you access to over 130 countries visa free.
Wow. Okay.
So whereas Portugal would probably give it to you, or let's say one of the top passports, for example, or Germany or Singapore is about 190 countries. Here we're at 140 countries and territories that gives access to it. So it's a fantastic passport. And the advantage is because of when you get a Grenada passport, you can easily apply for an E2 visa in the US, which can be extended many times over. Your family can immediately shift to the US, and the children and the spouses will be treated as US residents and enjoy the schooling benefit and all the other residency benefits that they would get being a US resident.
Understood. Thanks for that, Akash. Let's move to Fernando to complete this entire mobility trend that we are seeing from the HNI by providing a residence. So Fernando, coming to the residence part, since the COVID-19 outbreak, if I was to look at your market, which is say South Florida, Miami, what stage is your market at right now in the real estate cycle in comparison to say, the last 10 years?
Well, what we have witnessed since the COVID-19 is that the first initial months,
Fernando, I'm sorry, is this a graph for the rising COVID-19 cases, or is
that is just the price evolution in the Miami-Dade index in the last 10 years, that the average growth was about 5.59%, which is over an inflation rate. So it has a real appreciation. So it has been very beneficial. And it's also well below the mortgage rate. So in a way, any financial leverage provides with an extra, in a way, equity growth over time. So we're seeing that in the United States, the access to financing has been one of the main sources of wealth creation in the nation. And we've seen that how, since there's a very specific vector growth, if you catch up the cycle early on and you move to some locations that we know that will be expanding in the next 15, 20 years, this appreciation will be much higher. And of course, the cost of financing will be eroding because of inflation rates. So I know that for Indian national, it's not available for you guys to acquire property with financing, but for the U.S. nationals has been a very good option to increase the wealth. Talking about the wealth mobility, Miami has been benefiting from becoming one of the main second home market in the world, at least on the occidental side. And we have seen that how in the last year, in the last 2 years, we've seen a big shift from mostly international buyers. To be more clear, about 70% of these international buyers that were from Latin America, and we're seeing a bigger diversity coming from Europe and even from Asia in the last couple of years. But just to give you an idea, in 2015, in all the new luxury condominiums, 70% of the sales were international buyers and 30 were domestic buyers. Right now, that has changed significantly because of the appreciation of the dollars in terms of some of the key feeder market currencies. So what we're seeing now is about 53% of the buyers are coming from the domestic buyers, mainly from the Northeast Corridor, Illinois, and more recently, after COVID, California. And that is happening. Can we move to the next slide, please? This is happening mostly because of the fact that in the United States, you have three levels of taxation. We have number one, you have the federal state taxes, then you have the state taxes.
Fernando, I'm going to just stop you over there, because I want the tax. I know Florida as a state has got a huge tax advantage in comparison to a lot of other states in the US. But I'm going to hold you on that one. I'm going to ask you to hold your thought on that one, because I'm going to get Viraj and Vijay also in and then ask you that question. But I'm just going to, for a minute, go back to Somnath, and I'm going to put this question to him in terms of, Somnath, what are the emerging trends that you see coming from your HNI and promoter family clients and family offices towards overseas real estate investments targeted in the US?
Right. Very much related to the first point, and also what Fernando was alluding to a little bit. Primarily, the demand for US properties has been dovetailed around the question of residency in the US, because for several reasons, whether it is business expansion, sometimes just the globalization of business, and not last but not the least, kids' education. There has been a tremendous amount of interest in the US residency thing, and the real estate demand has been extremely dovetailed around the question of residency, because a lot of the visas become easier, better, or more accessible once you have a real estate investment on the ground in the US.
Right.
And there are several types of visas, which I'm sure you guys will cover today.
Sure.
So the demand for US real estate is really coming from, in terms of numbers, it's really coming from that side, which is how to get a foot on that door.
Got it. So basically, the nuance of the factors driving this global mobility is really determining our need for the type of real estate or the locale in the US.
Yes.
Understood. Thanks for that, Somnath. I think clearly what we are hearing is that India as a country is witnessing global mobility trend. We have also heard Fernando in terms of, an overview of the South Florida market, which is growing at an average of 6% per annum, much higher than what the mortgage rates are. Uh, let's go to Viraj and Vijay and figure out what are the nuances on getting the monies there, be it remittability, taxation, estate duty, etc. So I'm going to first, Viraj, I'm going to first come to you
Sure.
and ask you, From a federal and state perspective, if I buy the house in my personal name, do I have to pay income tax in respect of the house if it is kept vacant for self-use or if it is let out?
So, Ashwin, the good news is that anybody can purchase a real estate property in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And what Fernando was alluding to, if it's Florida, it's even better because US has tier level of taxes,
Right.
primarily federal and state, and Florida does not have individual tax. It used to have something called intangible tax years ago. That doesn't even exist now. So that really makes, that's why Florida is also a big retirement state as such, because people find that, good to go and enjoy your pension income. But at the same time, Fernando, it's one of my favorite cities too, so it's got great lifestyle. But getting into taxes, clearly you can purchase property in the United States as an Indian citizen or as an Indian resident. There is
Mm-hmm.
no issue on that. Vijay can talk very specifically about the remittances. But before you even think about purchasing, it's very important to figure out whether you want to possess this in your name or in any entity's name and
Right.
how you do so, because US also has, apart from income taxes and state taxes, also transaction taxes, like estate tax and gift taxes too. Now, that being said, Florida does not have at the state level estate taxes. Some of the states do have in US even state level estate taxes or an inheritance tax. But at the federal level, the estate tax is pretty rough, especially if you're a non-resident. Which I'm going to pause here if you want to make a comment about remittance, and then I'll try to jump upon, how different types of properties, if you let it out, if you keep it vacant, or if you self-use it, how will that all work here?
Sure. Vijay, you want to come in here?
Yeah, sure. So I think from remittance perspective, if you've acquired property in the US by utilizing your LRS limit, which is the liberalized remittance scheme limit of $250,000,
Mm-hmm.
the rental income, if at all, need not be brought back into India. You can keep it overseas.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the RBI circular clearly indicates.
But
Viraj,
what
back to
about
you.
the taxation? Do I pay taxes here in India or overseas? Because that's a question that keeps coming back to us from our clients.
So,
You would appreciate everybody wants to keep things in a very kosher manner.
yeah, and
Okay, I think, sorry, go ahead.
no, I'm glad, Vijay, you alluded about rental income here. And rental income, Ashwin, we're just getting there. As such, under domestic law, rental income falls under a bracket in federal tax, something what they call is not effectively connected income. I don't want to scare anybody with legal jargons,
Uh-huh.
but if you are a not effectively connected income, you get taxed at a flat rate of 30% of gross income. Now,
Okay.
there's treaty available. There are elections available to treat this income as trade or business income and tax it on net basis. I do want to say something here. You can literally deduct far more expenses, rental expenses, than probably you can deduct in India, which you would know more about it. But what I'm trying to say is that as such, it's 30% gross. There is treaty available, but more than treaty, under domestic law too, you can take an election and then tax your income on net basis. And it's very likely, it's case to case, but the rental expenses list is a laundry list in the United States. In fact, you can even depreciate a residential property in the United States, which is very difficult to, you typically an individual, which if I'm not wrong, an individually owned property, you can't depreciate. A rental property, you can't depreciate in India, but in US you can. Which I'll let you probably validate that or say something.
Sure, Viraj. I think just picking up from where Viraj mentioned, so we'll talk of a situation where a resident of India, a tax resident of India, invests into a property in the US,
Mm-hmm.
and the US property is let out.
Yeah.
The rental income need not be brought into India. B, if it is let out, that income that you own on that property is subject to tax in India. There is no benefit or reduction in tax which is available in the tax treaty. And the tax provisions in India allow a 30% standard deduction, if I may call it that, for repairs, etc. So if your gross income is 100, less 30, on 70, you will pay tax in India on the progressive rates of taxation that applies. That's point one. The second point being that this income that we talk about is expressed in foreign currency because you earn in dollars. How do you convert that into Indian rupees for computing your Indian taxable income is also relevant.
Okay.
You don't have to compute it on a month by month basis as you receive rent. You have to convert this into Indian rupees at the exchange rate prevailing on the last day of the previous year. So
Okay.
one exchange rate to be applied to all of the rental income.
Understood.
And last but not the least, Viraj spoke about the fact that in the US, you will have to pay tax either on gross income at 30% or on net basis.
Right. Which works better?
Take the first situation. Yeah, take the first situation, Ashwin. If it is gross income at 30%, in India, you will pay tax at 30% on 70. 100 minus 30, 70 is net income, 30% tax rate. So you pay 21 in India, you pay 30 in the US, and therefore you will get credit for taxes paid in the US up to 21 and no further tax payable in India. So your tax rate will be higher of the two when you
Okay.
get foreign tax credit. So that's also relevant when you try and look at investing in the US and you have rental income. Back to you,
So
Viraj,
what
Ashwin.
I hear you both say is you need not necessarily get the rental income back to India. However,
Correct.
they will need to be reported as income in your income tax return. If you're taxing it in the US, it's 30% gross, or you can also expense it, and the scope of expensing it is far better than what we have in India, which is, I think, music to everybody's ears. And last but not the least, if you are bringing in if you want to want to calculate it for your India income tax, then the rate of the rate of foreign exchange is to be taken on the last day of the previous year. Yeah,
That's right.
have I got it right?
Yeah. So when I say previous year, it's a tax term. So for the period April 19 to 31st March 20, if you had rental income, you have to
Right.
take the exchange rate as on 31st March 20.
Ah,
For the year April 19 to March 20.
Understood.
Previous year is a very tax term.
Absolutely, I agree. PY, AY, FY, they are,
All
I never
confusing.
got them
Ashwin,
right.
Ashwin, you gave a very good summary. The only thing which I think I'll add to your summary, which Vijay covered, is that you can claim foreign tax credits,
Uh-huh.
taxes paid. Vijay, if I can take this way the example that if you're resident in India and non-resident in US, then probably you can claim taxes paid in US as foreign tax credit in India, but the tax rate, effective tax rate of both country combined would be the higher of two, irrespective whichever way you go.
Understood.
Correct.
Thank you for that input, Viraj. So I'm going to ask Akash to step in here and get a deeper insight into the South Florida real estate market, for which we have Akash and Fernando. So Akash, over to you.
Thank you, Ashwin. Thank you. And thank you for the great summary. You summed it up very easily for all of us. So, Fernando, Florida being one of the most interesting places to invest right now, especially in times of pandemic, we've seen how the Florida real estate prices have moved ahead, and beaten all the other cities. So just wanted to get a better assessment from you about the Florida market. What are your expectations, from where we are at this moment, and where do you see it moving towards in the next 5 years?
Thank you, Kash. So what we have seen since the beginning of the pandemic and is that a huge amount of increase of the immigration from temporary and permanent basis. We've seen people for the first time the rental market that usually is very seasonable and is pretty much from the high season from December to March. We have seen people renting houses of 6 to 1 year because the kids are doing homeschool. And so the single family homes in the last quarter, the average price increased 15% and the average price per square foot like about 13%. So, but in the condominium market, it has been more stable and the increase was between 1 and 3%, depending the submarkets. So, and that has been pretty much very important because what I feel that for the next upcoming years, the inventory in the single family homes is drastically being reduced and the prices are going up very quickly. And the supply, there's not a lot of possibilities of increasing the supply of single family homes. So this gap in prices will make condominiums look cheap in the next couple of years. And in addition to that, the condominiums will have a huge push because in one of the slides that we have here, we're going to see that the supply of new inventory has been reducing in the last 3 years, and there's almost no new developments hitting the market until 2023-24. That is significant. We need pretty much about 3,000 to 4,000 units a year to be delivered from Miami-Dade to the Palm Beach County to absorb the increase of the demographics, which is at 902 people moving to Florida per day, from which 55% of them, they're coming to Southeast Florida.
So just want to jump in then, understand from you. So where would you estimate a demand and supply? Is there a gap or do you think it'll be absorbed? How soon? What would be the percentage according to you?
So if we do, can we have to then one slide that is the drop of the supply? Let's see if you have it there. The one that has the charts on a per year basis. But just to give you an idea, if we're thinking that about 500 people are coming to Southeast Florida per day, that requires at least 150 to 200 units per day.
Correct.
Correct. Now, this is without counting the second home buyers. And so this is an important trend. So we're seeing that there's a huge amount of new for-let buildings being built that is mostly for the workforce, because as we're seeing that the taxation is only favorable for individuals, but it's also very favorable for companies. So we're seeing a huge growth of relocation of companies coming to Miami with high-paying jobs like hedge funds, medical, new universities. For instance, Babson College is opening the campus here. Kellogg University has the #1 executive MBA now in Miami, Coral Gables. So we're seeing high-paying jobs moving to our area. Remember that Florida had a huge transition from agricultural state, from tourism, they're all low-paying jobs, into becoming the second most important financial market in the United States after New York. And we're seeing the new technological companies that are being now moving to Miami and developing the headquarters for the Americas or the Latin America headquarters. And because they're benefiting from a labor force that is the only place in the United States that you can have people have dual or trilingual workforce that have master degree. So because when you talk about the Latin component in the United States, very different the Latin component in Arizona or California, where there's mostly workers. While you shift it to the East Coast, you're seeing more like professionals and people with a higher degree of education.
So that's very interesting, Fernando. And I'm going to just jump in there because, you said something very interesting about the demand and supply. You've also spoken about the fact that it's a very promising market, and it's going to continue to grow. There are a lot of people who are coming into Florida, and of course the prices are moving up. So if I like an Indian, if I were to invest, potentially in South Florida in the market, where would you recommend we should invest, and how would you compare this to an investment in New York or Chicago or some other state? So why should I move away from New York and Chicago and come into Florida?
Well, first of all, because the demographic trends are seeing that Illinois has been one of the biggest losers, because if you see the taxations at the state level, New York, this is perfect slide, thank you. If you see the taxation of the high-paying states like New York, California, Chicago, if you see the personal state tax, and then you see the sales and the corporate tax, but let's go only on the individual taxes. We have in the United States right now 55 million people that they are the famous baby boomers. That is people that were born after the Second World War, that now they're to an age of retirement. So these people are choosing where they want to retire. So we're seeing people leaving New York, leaving Chicago, leaving California because they're high-paying tax states, and moving to California and even Texas, or even these other states, Nevada, that they have a more favorable tax structure. So if you combine in Florida, you have three main components why the people are moving here. Number one, taxation. Number two, cost of living. That is a chart that you see on your right. We see that Chicago, the index is 123, but New York is 241. And if you go to San Francisco, it's 180. So that means that it's 80% above the national average. While in South Florida, we're only between 10 and 15% above the national average. So if you combine lower taxes, that in the case of Manhattan, you're saving 12% on your income, so which is very significant. And you also mix it up with a lower cost of living that gives you a higher disposable income. So when that is more favorable when you want to retire, and you have the third best health system in the United States here in Miami. You have the best quality of life because we're the only state in the United States that you can go to the ocean 9 months out of the 12. Because California is beautiful, but you need to be very brave to go into the water, even in the summertime because it's so cold. So we have a lifestyle that is unique: the golf courses, the shopping, the tennis courts, the marinas, and all this with a lower taxes and low cost of living. And that's why Florida will continue to perform any other market. Illinois, Chicago, they're losing population, and New York, they're losing population. So it's not a very valid long-term investment proposition, because we will continue to see the taxation eroding the quality of life. And now with the pandemic, this has become more obvious because people now they need more space in their homes. And if you understand the prices in New York on the residential market, they are pretty much 4 to 5 times higher than in Miami. So you can afford a lot more space. You can have your home office. You can have an outdoor living with terraces, etc., that you cannot have in most of these markets. And the cold does not allow you to enjoy the outdoor living. So I'm extremely optimistic with the future of our market, because also we're starting to reach some level of scarcity. Like 10 to 20 years ago, we have plenty of development sites overlooking the water. Right now, it's very, very limited. So once we finalize the first ocean front and the bayfront area will be fully developed, we're going to start seeing prices increasing with the increase of the demand, and the gap of the prices with New York will start to shrink. I'm not saying that we're going to reach New York prices, at least not in my lifetime, I think, but I feel it's going to reduce the gap. It's not going to be 3 to 4 times more expensive. It will be, let's say, 2 times more expensive. So this gap will bring a long-term appreciation to the buyers.
That's great, because you've touched upon a very important point where you spoke about the scarcity, and that will basically bring in the stability, and also have a systematic rise in the price of the real estate in Miami. That's wonderful. I'm just going to ask Ashwin. He had a question on mansion tax. So Ashwin, if you could take
So
that.
back to the taxmen, and we've got two of them with us today. So my question to you, Viraj, is that we heard about inheritance tax. I think it was you or Fernando who just alluded to it. Is there any way to reduce implications of inheritance tax to individuals, or structure it in the US? If you could just throw some light on that.
Sure, Ashwin. It's there's something called a state tax in United States, which does not exist in India, which you probably can comment upon how it works in India. But it does. So it's pretty unique for somebody who's from India to deal with estate taxes. But estate taxes for a non-resident, which I'm just assuming most of the investors here would be non-resident in US, to be a resident for estate tax it is dependent on your intent, and you got to be a domicile of United States. So assuming you're not, you're a non-domiciliary,
Right.
estate tax is actually even more tricky, because if you have US assets, what they call is US situs assets, and a US real estate is a US situs asset.
Mm-hmm.
And in the scenario of death, you got to pay estate tax in United States. An exemption for a non-resident or a non-domiciliary for estate tax is only $60,000. The reason I say that is somebody who's a domicile and resident this year, I mean, at this moment, the exemption is $11.58 million. And Fernando, at the beginning, we're talking about U.S. elections. This is something which Biden's calling, is that he would actually reduce the estate tax exemption even for residents, which is right now 10 million pegged to an inflation rate. That's why it comes to 11.58 for this year. Biden's planning to take it back to $5 million,
Which was earlier the case.
which was Trump brought 10 million, and
Right.
that's actually only open till 2025. But I'm assuming, Ashwin, our investors here remain non-resident in the United States, then they
Right.
only have $60,000 to deal with. Now, there's few things you can do, and
Mm-hmm.
probably I'll ask Vijay to chime in here too. One is you own the property in the name of a foreign corporation. Because if you own the property in a US foreign corporation is not subject to estate tax in the United States. But
Mm-hmm.
then comes the complications. A foreign corporation which has US properties also can be subject to some other issues, including branch profit tax and things like that. So it has to be very closely examined. I'm going to make it, Ashwin, super simple if I have to say something. And Fernando, probably I'll ask you to chime in, is the values of these properties too. But if you take a simple term life insurance to protect your kids at the time of death, and if the term life insurance covers your taxes, which is at 40%, the state tax rate is 40% highest rate. If it covers your life insurance covers the taxes for your kids, you probably can just take a term life insurance and forget about it. If you have one single property in the United States, at the time of death, probably your term life insurance will take care of the state taxes arising out of it. Ashwin, I'm oversimplifying it. I want probably Vijay and Fernando to chime in here.
Sure.
Yeah,
I
and I
like
think
that, Viraj. I think simplification is the key for a layman to understand what's the solution, because we've heard so much about complicated structures and, putting it in a trust company structure and so on and so forth. But I like what you said in terms of just buying an insurance plan and just keeping that money there. Vijay, over to you. You were saying something.
yes. So I feel that that's the smartest way because it's a very simple way to cover yourself. We're talking about $50 to $100. I mean, it's nothing that is. And the cost of opening a corporation is, let's say, and the U.S. corporation is about. If you do it yourself, can be only $150. But I wouldn't recommend to do it that way. But usually, if you hire an attorney or CPA, it will be somewhere in the range of $500 to $1,000 to create it, and just the carrying cost of having a corporation here in the US is only $138.5. So that's not an expensive proposition. It's not like in the United Kingdom or Spain or Portugal that opening a corporation, it requires minimum capital, a lot more expensive with attorneys. So the actual cost of the corporations is not so relevant, but I feel that the life insurance is a cleaner and easier way to hold it because of the low carrying cost of these insurances. Now, if you want to have 3, 4, 5 companies, entity, or you have a commercial interest and you invest millions of dollars, yeah, then corporations could be more effective in the long term. So depending on what you do, and that's why I think Viraj is so right. There's no one fits all solution. You need to understand the composition of a family. You need to understand the property you're acquiring, the holding period, and the use. Because in certain cases, if it's for personal use, you just need to worry about capital gain. And if you want to rent it, you need to also be more careful about the ordinary income and what are the deductions that you can do on the ordinary income that could be of course, expensive to carry the corporation, the CPAs, the HOA, the property taxes, and including some of the trips that you might be doing to the United States, you can put as a cost to hold the corporation. And a very important point, it is depreciation. Depreciation here is fairly aggressive for residential properties in comparison to other countries. And just to finalize the other question, sorry that I forgot, the stamp duty tax in Florida is less than 1%, while in New York it's 3.4%, and in Canada ranges between 15 to 24%. So it's a very inexpensive entry point, and also that the commissions on real estate are being paid by the seller. So there's not a hell lot of transaction cost to get into our market. If you pay cash, that it will be most of the cases for you guys, is going to be less than 2% the transactional cost, which is great. And so that is something very unique. And I feel that it makes it very easy to acquire properties in Florida.
Sure. Definitely, Fernando. I'm sure Florida is the way to go. But Vijay, so what I gather from what Viraj mentioned, I think considering the mindset of Indian clients to buy property in their individual names, which is really what their thought process always has been. It's if and to counter the inheritance tax issues as such from a non-domicile person, it is better to just buy a plain vanilla insurance cover and be done with it. Of
Absolutely,
course,
Ashwin.
if the quantum of the property is very large and there are operations, there is a company holding and all of that, there can be a structure put in with your, one has to do it very carefully, like Viraj mentioned.
Right.
That's right. I think the way I would put it, Ashwin, is simplicity is the key, as you correctly set out. People who are from India would relate to what I'm saying as well. That if you house the property in a company, and if you want to occupy the property, there is tax in your hands, because
Right.
it's a benefit that the company has given to you
Right.
without remunerating itself for the use of the house. So there is tax in India on that part. Second piece, if at all in the journey ahead you want to let it out and or sell, there are two levels of taxation. One, the company in the US may have to pay tax on the gain or on the property rental. And when it distributes the money back to India, if it does, there will be further taxation in the hand of the resident in India. Plus the whole thing about a foreign corporation from India perspective being set up, and if the control and management of that corporation is in India, the foreign corporation itself is taxable in India. There are far too many complexities that need to be addressed if you want to do it through a corporation or an overseas trust.
Right.
If it's going to be one or two properties and your life cover is equal to 40% of the value of the property, that is simpler and much better.
Very beautifully and very articulately explained to the audience. Thanks for that, Vijay. I have one more question for you, Vijay, which is, what we are saying is that if a property value is more or less within the family's consolidated LRS limits, and you're just looking at one or two properties, then this insurance way of protecting is a much simpler way. My question, and if it is a much larger value, then we go through the structuring, etc., right?
Right.
My question is that if we are looking at buying it through the LRS route, how can one and the property value is say in the range of 2 million or so, and there are adequate members of the family, how can we kind of combine, because there is some ambiguity on the clubbing of the remittances of under liberalized remittance scheme. So if you can throw some light on that for the audience and again simplify it like you've done the rest of it, it'll be appreciated.
Sure, Ashwin. I wish it was simple, but it is not. And the law says very clearly, the FAQs of RBI indicate, as what I read, that if you're going to buy a property outside India, the property should be in your name.
Right.
So let's say if you remit $250,000 in year one, and you buy the property, very well. If it's construction linked payment, You can make the payment year 1 250, year 2 250, year 3 250, and so on and so forth. That's one part of the response. If the value of the property is $1 million and there are 4 members of the family together, as I read it, all the 4 members will have to become co-owners of the property which is going to be purchased so that they can remit $1 million.
Right.
And so on and so forth if it is construction linked. Important aspect, RBI guidelines do not allow an Indian resident individual to take a facility or loan or borrow money for the purposes of buying the property. That is not permitted.
Mm-hmm. So that is completely out of question. Okay, understood.
Great. So,
Akash,
Ashwin,
you want to go
yeah.
ahead and get a further sense on what are the developments?
So, Fernando, all this while you've been flirting with us about how wonderful Florida is and why we should be investing in what a great state it is. If you could now throw, and we've been discussing about 2 of developments that we spoke about. So if you could just give us an idea of that, and I think we'll put up a slide, and you could just define what are the reasons and benefits of investing in some of these, and give us some examples, please.
Perfect. So just to give you a little bit more understanding of who we are. So we're One Sotheby's. We own the franchise from pretty much from Miami-Dade to Melbourne. So that is all the Atlantic coast in Florida. We have 20 offices, 1,000 agents, and we do about $3.5 billion in sales per year. And we represent 20 projects. So the idea today was to give you a mini sample, and Akash knows all our portfolio extremely well. So this is just a few examples, but we have a lot of other options that we were not able to discuss today. So we picked up 2 very different developments in nature. So just to show some differences. One, it is Creative HQ, that is an office condominium. Office condominium, due to the increase of the companies relocating to Miami, and because of the lack of Class A new offices that have individual cooling system, so AC, individuals ACs, especially because of the pandemic, we're seeing that we're foreseeing a decrease in the occupancy rates in the Class B and C, because they have been built in the 70s to the 90s, and most of them, they have central cooling systems. Due to the pandemic, people are shying away from this type of buildings, and there's a very few limited supply coming on the office side. So this project has pretty much from the 5th floor to the 8th floor, so it's only 160,000 square feet of offices that we have, we're having for available for purchase. That is very unique. In the United States, and especially Miami, 95% of the offices are owned by a single owner, and they just lease it to the tenants. So it's very difficult to buy an office. So this is very unique. And we have small models that can be offices for people that they are accountants, CPAs, private bankers, and the typical service-oriented companies. And this building will be perfect because it's located in the core of downtown Miami. They have a Metro Mover station that is our in public transportation system that is connected to the building. It is 1.5 blocks away from the Brightline station. That is the speed
Fernando,
train.
I'm sorry, I'm going to cut in here because we're running short on our time. But if you could just focus on letting us know, like for example, the ticket size, the payment plan, your rental yield estimates, and the price expected, and when is the completion date?
Well, this one will be in the end of 2022. We are requesting only 40% down. The ticket prices start in the low 300s, so it's very easy for an international to buy it.
Correct. The LRS, correct.
So we have 40% down payment until completion. They give us enough time in pretty much having 19, 20, 21, and 22, 4 years of remittance that can be sent. So you can acquire a small space, or you can get a larger space, and you can unite them or rent it individually depending on the supply.
And what is the yield? What is the yield in your mind for rental yield for it?
Legally, we're not allowed to speak about yields, unfortunately, even that I know the yield, because we will require to have a security exchange license. So we'll discuss that, and then you can share with the people, but it will be above the inflation rate, and then that will be an attractive return. For the first 40% down payment, the developers offer a 4% interest on the deposit that will be credited at closing. And if someone wants to put more money down, the difference between 40% that is required to purchase until 100, whatever difference you want to invest in the middle, you'll be earning a 5% interest,
Well,
which is
That's good.
yeah, you start earning money from day one. That's pretty much.
And that gets adjusted with your final payment, I would assume.
Exactly. Everything will be created at closing. So as a matter of fact, it will be having a huge discount that will lower your basis and increase your current yield once you lease it up.
Okay.
So this is
if you could also tell us about the second one, which looks just outstanding.
The developer is Indian national descent. By the way, we've seen a question in the chat. Yes, there's an important Indian community in our market. It's not so visible because they're not all together, but they have a huge amount of Indian national. They are in the development industry. Villa Valencia is a very boutique condominium that is pretty much only 30 and 39 residences, now 38 because one was combined. And the other beauty is that they have individual foyers. You have 20,000 square feet of amenities only for 38 residents.
It's quite
it is located in one of the most important districts from the school and university perspective. So, and the units start in the $1.5 million. So we have in 2019, 20, and 21 to send remittance. So it gives you enough time to acquire the properties. This is a building that we consider as being for CEOs of companies that will be retiring to the area. So we'll be having or expat, a company relocation, and or diplomatic corp that will be choosing this building because of the quality, the location, and of course it's 10 minutes away from the airport. It's an amazing finishes. So I don't have a lot of time, but this is one of the most beautiful boutique condominiums that will be in a very consolidated area that is called Coral Gables.
It definitely looks it from the photograph. So the $1.5 million that you spoke about as a ticket size, how many bedrooms would that be? Starting price?
3 bedrooms. So it's 3-bedroom units. They are large.
Well, that's a huge amount of space. That's great.
They have very large terraces, very deep. The integration with outdoor space is fantastic. The finishes are out of this world. You have golf simulators, you have billiards, you have like a place to have breakfast or coffee. You have everything you can probably imagine. You have even cabanas that you can purchase by the pool. So it's a very, very complete building, very chic and boutique. And then we have from $300,000 to $50 million, we have everything in the middle. So we have oceanfront properties that is starting $1.6 million in Vero Beach. That is, you can be living just by the ocean, a beautiful setting. So we have absolutely everything you need. The project with marinas. So we have everything. So whatever you guys need, just call Akash. That's the most important message today. Call Akash.
Noted.
Ashwin. Because
that was really great. Good insight into 2 of your handpicked projects. I'm afraid we will have to we've got just maybe a couple of minutes to take 1 or 2 questions. And this question is there for Vijay. Vijay, can 4 members of a family remit monies under the liberalized remittance scheme into an escrow account and purchase under one name and assign interest in the name of other members from an Indian tax perspective?
So I think that's not a tax question, as I would say it. It's more of a question from the exchange control perspective.
Right.
To my mind, there is ambiguity. You can remit monies outside, but the property will still have to be owned by 4 individuals. I don't think, and I suspect that it may not be easy to own it in one name.
Okay, fine. So you're saying that, just to err on the side of caution, it's better to own it under 4 names instead of owning it on one name.
That is correct.
Yeah.
And of course,
certain
Sorry, go
certain
ahead.
countries have a requirement when you're talking about global mobilities, certain countries have a requirement wherein the amount required to buy the property is not, within the LRS limit of one person. So it has to be like for EB5, if somebody has to put in 500,000 or 900,000 now, how would he do that? He will take 4 years to accumulate that money if he has
Correct.
to invest in EB5. So how does he do that?
Yeah, I think you will have to wait for that point in time to get that in place, because it's very unlikely that you can all club it into one name, considering the way the RBI guidelines are.
Okay.
So and one can take a chance. You can go back to the authorized dealer and see if the authorized dealer is happy with that proposition. Then you might go ahead, because the authorized dealers, to my mind, are also an extension of what the RBI has given them authorities. If they are comfortable, then you may go ahead. But again, I would err on the side of caution.
Understood. Understood. So, ladies and gentlemen, as usual, we've run out of time. It's been an absolute pleasure, though. Thank you for sparing the time today. And I hope our attendees have been able to take away some learnings from the session focused on US properties, LRS, taxation, etc. In case of any questions not answered, your advisors, part of ASK Wealth, Deloitte, as well as the Sotheby's Realty team remain at your disposal. And we look forward to assisting you for your real estate requirements, both in India and across the globe. Once
Ashwin,
again, thank you all. Sorry, Fernando, you were saying something?
yeah, I just received a text from the developer of Villa Valencia, and he wants to beat all the other promotions, and he told me he will pay 7% interest on the deposit for the next 3 units. So just keep that in mind, okay?
For sure.
That's a great one to end. It's like, ending the webinar with a bang, and we're going to take you up on that shortly.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for to my fellow panelists, without whose contribution the webinar would not have been any success today. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ashwin. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Everyone, pleasure to be with you guys.
Thanks,
Thank
Viraj.
you.